So now that the model is complete, it's time to start unwrapping. Um, I like to see unwrapping as basically you want to imagine that your model has been wrapped up very tightly for Christmas with lots of nice wrapping paper. And what we're going to do is unwrap that wrapping paper, and we're then going to colour it in and put it back on. And that basically in turn gives your model your colour and your diffuse map basically. So what we're going to start by doing is adding the unwrap modifier. Now this unwrap modifier gives us a nice working space just here, and when we unwrap our model we basically want to plonk it all inside of this. And the way we unwrap is to select our faces in the UV map modifier, and we then just go through and start selecting faces. Right. I'm going to start by just selecting everything down this flat edge here. I don't like unwrapping. I think it's very, very boring. But it's one of those things that's just got to be done, really. Oh, don't think I want that one. Alright, so now we've selected everything down that flat plane. If I did have both sides of the gun, I would select exactly these same faces on the opposite side. We're then going to select the planar unwrap, and we have a gizmo just here, which is basically the direction it takes the projection from. At the moment that's along the wrong axis, and we want it along the X, and you see how the gizmo has now surrounded all our selected faces. Right, we're then just going to go into the edit tool, and you'll see how the gizmo has squished it up to fit within our active working plane. What we want to do is click normalize map. Right, this is going to no doubt going to make it absolutely ginormous, but it's the correct scale and it hasn't been squished up. What we're then just going to do is move it over here. This plane here is a bit stuck inside, just in here and here. And I just want to scale it in a little bit just to make sure all of the polygons have got a nice area of the map. They're not too squashed up. What you will notice is if we click this little drop down here, we can select the checker pattern. This gives us a good indication of how much space our textures have. What you'll notice a lot of the time, basically what we want is the squares to be as square as possible. Let me shrink this up a little bit just to show you. Right, squares on here, nice and square. They're not stretched, they're not warped, and this means that when the texture is applied, it shouldn't be warped or sort of a bit mushed up. What you will notice is in places like this, the texture has gone absolutely crazy, and that's because of the way in which it's been unwrapped. Sort of, see what you'll notice, I'll show you here. As I pull this down, all the texture warps. Everything which is under here, so the colour in this area is displayed on this polygon that I've got selected. That's pretty much how it works. And this is why you want it to be nice and square and things. So as we stretch it down, all of this colour is squashed to fit within this polygon, and you don't really want any squashing. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to select everything apart from that bit I've already unwrapped, and I'm just going to do a planar map along the x-axis. I'm just going to scale it up. This gives you a good indication of what you have and haven't unwrapped. My general method is to unwrap everything and then to move it into this box at the end. So I'm just going to select by element. I'm just going to move the clip over to here, barrel over here, a few bits and bobs about. That will give us a good indication of what hasn't been unwrapped and where they are. Right, so that's the side of the gun done. Oh. Right, just going to start on this back section of the gun now. Just going to go through and select the edges. Not edges, polygon, sorry. I've got ignore back facing on, which I don't want on. Because that has stopped me from selecting the faces down the back here. So I'm just going to make sure I've got everything selected there that I want. I'm going to hit plane here again, and this time I want the y-axis. Just going to go back into the edit tool. And that's that little section there. I'm going to then unwrap this section here. Along the z-axis. Right, what these blue sections here are indicating is that something that I have selected is attached along here, and I believe it is these edges. Element. So yeah, so this edge here, which is red, is in parallel to that blue edge. You see it goes all the way around. So what we're going to need to do is just flip it over. So we're going to use the mirror tool and a vertical flip. There we go. You've got the same thing with vertices there. So this vert is attached to here, this vert attached to here, so on and so on. So what I'm going to do is just select this top line of verts, and I'm going to scale them. But I don't want to scale them outwards like that or inwards like that, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to hold down Shift and drag, and that's going to do a uniform scale and line them all up. I'm just going to drag it down a little, and I'm just going to line up all these rows we've got along here. This one here as well, and along the top. And that will just allow for us to attach together these two sections a bit easier. So what I'm going to do is select the edges we have along here. We're going to go Tools, Stitch Selected, and that is going to basically weld that set of edges which I had selected to their corresponding edges. Stitch Selected. We want to put the bias down to 0. And also turn off scale clusters. I'm just going to hit set as default, and now that is scaled up. I'm also just going to go through and just uniform scale some of these small sections down here just to straighten them up. We then need to scale this last little or unwrap this last little section on the back of the weapon here. Plane here again, I think we want the y-axis. Move him over to here. And again, we're just going to select these edges along here. Tools, Stitch Selected, and it's got a bit haywire. Okay, I'm just going to turn off the line clusters there. Now I'm just going to just have a quick fiddle about and just make sure it's lined up as best as possible. Make sure it's symmetrical as possible as well. Imagine there's a few errors there. Oh well. I did have a watch of Retired Monkey's unwrapping tutorial. He had a nice set of tools, but I don't know how to get to them. So if you ever watch this, you can tell me where you got those nice tools from, because it saves me selecting all these verts and aligning them manually. So basically what I'm doing is just going through these rows, holding down shift and scaling to uniform scale them and to basically line them up. Now what I can do is just scale the whole lot down and just put it out of the way over here. That's it. Then have a quick look on our texture to see if there's any warping. You can see that just along this edge the textures are warping a little bit, so what we're going to need to do, because they're stretched, it means the polygons are too small in the unwrap, so we just want to drag them out and make them a little bit bigger, and you should see that it adds sort of pulls together, they diffuse on the model. So when that looks about right, we'll just leave it at that. And I'm just going to position it in about the right location on the model on the back here, so I know it goes on the back of the handle. Next I'm just going to go through to the front of the gun. Right, this section I'm just going to unwrap along the y-axis, like I say. So it looks a bit crazy there. Ah, sorry, I know what it is. It's because I've deleted some of the back facing. So again, just going to go through a bit of uniform scaling, just to line it all up as good as best as possible. Scale it down and just put it in position. I'm also going to flip horizontally, as this line of edges on this side match up with this line of edges there. Plonk him in. You'll notice that when you unwrap, you'll end up with loads of little holes. You really don't want to have too many holes. You want to pack everything in as tight as possible. So I'm going to fill up all these gaps with all the little twiddly bits and the little add-ons that we've put on the gun. Things like these little, I don't know what they are. I think that's the clip release and little noodly bits like that. Things like the clip. I'm going to unwrap the trigger now. I find generally when I unwrap weapons, I normally just use plain unwrap tools. There are other tools. This is all I ever really need. You've got pelt mapping, you've also got boxes, type of unwraps. I'll show you. Line these up. Put it down. Let's do the front of the clip as well. Clip trigger. last little section on the bottom, plania. What we've got a best align tool, which will take the align the gizmo as best as it can, rather than just doing it from one specific coordinate. So rather than X, Y, Z, it'll just do a big mixture of the lot and take the best it can. Just going to select these edges here. I'm going to use the stitch selected again. Okay. Moving over here. So what other tools do we have? We've got, when you make your selection, I'll just do the barrel here. There's a plania map, which, where's my gizmo? Just going to align it. You can see the gizmo's a flat plane, and it will take the projection from that flat plane. So there you go, that's basically that barrel from the side. We've also got a box, which is made up of a number of planes, and it will take a projection from each one of those planes, so you end up with something that looks a bit crazy along here. So you've unwrapped it twice. Spherical doesn't really help with this barrel either. It creates a sphere. Scale up the gizmo a bit, and it will take projections from everywhere in that sphere. But what we want is the cylindrical one. As we're unwrapping the cylinder, and it will take lots of projections from all the way around that cylinder. We just need to line it up to the correct axis, which by the looks of it is Y. I'm also just going to scale it up a touch just to show you. So the way it unwraps, and it's going to have a start and finish to where it unwraps, because it's going to make it flat like that. Cylinder. And what indicates where it's going to split your UV is this green line along here. And if you have a look on your model, these green lines show your seams of your unwrap. So what we want is we want it in the least visible spot, because the more it can be quite hard trying to hide seams from on your texture. So we've moved this green using just the rotate tool on the gizmo to put the seam on the opposite side of the barrel, so we don't have to hide it. Saves us some texture work. And that's that done. The only other things we need to unwrap are the front and back. I'm just going to select both of them, hit plania, untick plania, and that's that done. Looks like I've accidentally scaled that barrel a little bit. Can't remember when. Here. Right. It's going to get a little bit fiddly. Right. What you'll notice is that you'll end up with quite a little hard to get to spots. For example, all this geometry, which is underneath this slide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and collapse the stack. Do not delete it, because that will delete all the work you've done so far. What you want to do is collapse it, which will save all your, it will just make the edit poly, or no, sorry, not edit poly, the unwrap, it will sort of save it in the actual geometry. So what we can do is go in and select the element tool here. And I'm just going to select all these elements of the top slide that we don't want, and I'm going to hide. So if you go under the edit geometry, we've got the hide tool. We're going to hide, untick that. So we'll deselect it, so it's taking the yellow box off it, and then I'm going to go back to the unwrap modifier. And what you'll notice is that everything which I've already unwrapped is of these sections is still there. Exactly the same way we left it. Everything's still there, we just can't see it. So now this gives us a bit more scope to actually see what we're doing. I'm going to go through and make the selections of this all within here. Going to hit the planar map modifier once again. I think we want to unwrap along the Z axis. That gizmo's appeared around. Edit. When you do collapse the modifier, it gets rid of, it reticks this normalized map, so you just want to go through and untick that. Scale her up a bit. What I'm going to do is press A, which is going to snap my rotation angles, so it will rotate 5 degrees always. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to attach this to the top half of the gun, which I've already got, and I'm just now figuring out where my blue and red lines match up. So what I need to do is I need to flip it once along the horizontal, once along the vertical, to line her up, scale her down, and I'm just going to select all my edges along the top of the grip section. I'm going to go Tools, Stitch Selected, bias down to 0, untick the scale clusters. Now if it only wants to be on. Doesn't seem to have done that too well. I'm just going to do a bit of manual moving about, which is never good fun. Just going to align these partly along the edges. Yeah. Just line those verts along the top there. Right, just going to unwrap the inside of this barrel now. Going to make my selection, and I'm going to use the cylindrical unwrap again. Make sure it goes along the y-axis, I believe. Scale it up just so it's round. I'm scaling that along the z-axis there. And again, I'm going to rotate it until my little green marker is making as few seams as possible in a place where the seams aren't going to be seen as well. It also indicates on your model where the seam's going to be through these green lines. As I rotate this around, those green lines should move. There you go, so it's up there now. Oh, it's moving along, moving around. But we want it right over here out of the way, so there's no seams on that little section. Edit again. So trying to do these at the front. I'm just going to rotate him around. what's happened, my model doesn't seem very square. So yeah, I'm just going through selecting the verts, uniform scaling, just to line up as best as I can. Everything that you unwrap, you want to basically change how big it is on the unwrap in here, dependent on how important it is. The more pixels something needs, the more colour, the more texture, the more detail it needs, you want it to be bigger. So the more important things you want big, the less important things that aren't going to be seen you want small. Something which isn't going to be seen, something which isn't important, shouldn't take up half your UV map because it's a waste. Something which is important and needs a lot of pixels on it, you make big. Hey, I'm wrapping little bits like this. So I'm just going to plane the map again along the y-axis. I'm going to just hit the select element. The select element in the unwrap modifier doesn't select elements of geometry. It selects elements of your unwrap. So as you chop your unwrap up, it creates all of these little X sections or elements. It's not going to select the whole weapon. So I'm just going to use that tool just to move these about. Linear Z-axis. Intic element. Right, so this wants to rotate anti-clockwise. Oh, select our move tool and drag him into here. Scale down a touch. Here, we just want to do the outside of this trigger guard as well. Planar Y. Over. And finally select the bottom. Planar Z. We're going to want to rotate anti-clockwise again. Over. Select all of that. Let's go name it trigger guard. This little naming box just is basically to help you make selections. So you can select something on the polygon mode or edge mode or whatever. Select it, just click in the box, type in what you want it to be called, and then that's your selection. You can go into the drop down box and just click on your selection up here and it should select it for you. So this one called just trigger. See, I like to name things as I go along through this, because at the end you end up with like lots of little puzzle pieces which you can move about and select a lot more easily through your little selection tool up here. Trying to figure out what little sections to do next. Okay, if we just unwrap this bottom of the grip here, and just selected it in the unwrap modifier, but I wanted to make sure I haven't selected anything that I don't want selected. There's a polygon which needs to be deleted there. So planar, Z, edit, want to rotate around the anti-clockwise again. Just going to scale it down. Also just want to flip vertically there, so our gun's matching up as best as possible. I think I'm going to move this front handle of the gun over here. Just plonk this into the right correct position down the front there. And the main problem that I'm going to have is seams, and also if this section here was a lot bigger or a lot smaller than this section here, and I put a general base texture across the top, sort of, you know, I'm going to want a plastic with a sort of grippiness on it. That grippiness on the texture is going to stretch or shrink if this is bigger or smaller, and therefore be a different size on the model. So the grain on this can be quite small, yet the grain on that would be quite big, and it would look a bit funny on the texture of the model. So because of that, you want to sort of be quite wary of what you're doing. So although some sections you will want bigger and smaller depending on their importance, you've also got to think about how that size difference is going to affect your final texture that you put on your model. You know, if it is going to have an effect, or if it's going to look a bit funny or odd. Alright, I'm just going to select that, which is this little section here, I believe. Oh. And I'm going to just go mapping. I want no flat mapping. I want. Maybe I don't. No idea what happened there. I just pressed enter and it fixed it. Flatten mapping will basically, I think it unwraps each of your faces individually, but for a little box like this, it can be quite handy. So I'm just going to basically take what it unwrapped, and I'm just going to use our stitch selected tool on the edges just to attach it back together in the most appropriate way. So I'm just making, I'm selecting the vertices and the edges just to line them up correctly. So that vert and that vert correspond, that vert and that vert correspond. And now I can stitch selected. Okay, the one on the back here lines up with this edge here. And that vert is with that vert, so what I'm going to need to do is flip it horizontally and also flip it vertically. And now they're matched up, and I can select this edge, stitch selected, yes, okay. I'm just going to do the same with this one. So again, I need to flip it twice, once horizontally, once vertically. Tools, stitch selected. Okay. Again, this is a pretty unimportant part of the model, so we can shrink that down, get it out of the way. Right, I'm just going to have a quick look over this section. What else we have to unwrap? A couple of edges here. There's one. Where's the second one? Just need to unwrap these two edges here. Plania. It is possible for you to overlap your UVs. If you overlap sections, it means they'll both use exactly the same texture space and therefore the same colour on the texture. Same mapping. So now I'm just having a bit of a sort out, making a bit of space. Oh. So I'm just having another look on this little section of the map, see what I haven't unwrapped. So I've got this other little box here, so I'm just going to do mapping, flatten mapping. I don't know what the dialogue is that's just come up because I can't see it, but I'm just going to hit enter. And this is the flatten map. I'm just going to find out which is the one on top, which I'm going to use it in the middle. Square it off a little touch. Right, then we're going to start stitching it back together. So, after having a quick look, I know I've got to scale that twice. Stitch selected. This guy needs to be rotated clockwise, 90 degrees. Stitch selected again, and same with the last two. Stitch selected. I'm just going to use my uniform scale tool, which I've used in the past. So scale, hold down shift, drag it along, just to line up all these verts. That little section done. Alright, next I'm going to just work on... Actually, I'm going to get rid of this little bit, so I'm going to do mapping, flapping, matting, mapping, slam enter. Just go through and stitch all this together. Stitch selected, okay. Tool, stitch selected, okay. And last but not least, so all I'm doing again is just figuring out which way round it goes, and stitching selected. edges. I think that's sort of the main section there. It's got all the little twiddly bits really. But as you can see, unwrapping isn't particularly complicated, it's just a matter of just taking selected sections and just chopping it up really. So what I'm going to do now is the clip. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to collapse all again. Yes. I'm going to select my elements, unhide all, and this time I'm going to select this main body of the gun, which I know is unwrapped, and I'm going to hide. I'm also going to hide these other couple of little bits which I've already done, and this was going to give me enough room to work on these last bits. I think that bit's done as well. Right, so we're going to put the unwrap UV on again. Slam edit just to make sure everything's still there. I'm going to do a quick Control S to save, because you don't want your unwrapping to break, because that is possibly the worst thing that could ever happen, as it is incredibly boring. So you notice I've selected both sides. Do the same on these two bottom sections. Planar, turn off normalized map, and I think we want the x-axis. Now you notice that both sides are perfectly on top of each other. Just move those up here. So bottom section. If you hold down shift while you're moving selections about, it'll move it dead straight rather than, you know, any angles, which can be handy. There is also a snap button. Here we go. So if I wanted these two to be lined up, I've turned on my snap to grid. We've got a little blue line here which it tries to snap to. You see how that appears directly on top of what I've already got, which can be handy if you're unwrapping parts separately but then do want them perfectly lined up. I think what I'm going to do is make these straight, just there, which is going to mean it's easier for me to attach this front section. I'm going to select the back as well, planar. I think we want the y-axis. Select by element, which means we're going to first select the back part there, and we've got the front. Alright, we want to make sure we select this inside section here, because this is where we don't want the seam. We're going to want the seam on the other side, because this is the side the player is going to see. And as you can see, we need to flip this geometry as the adjacent edge from this edge is on the outside. So I'm just going to flip it. I'm going to make sure that that vert's in the right place, and then we're just going to use our stitch selected, put our bias on 0, turn off the scale clusters, and you see that they're both lined up correctly. And we then want to do the same with the back here. So you just want to select the edge which is going to be seen. They're both lined up correctly. And tool stitch selected. Out. Bias. Why is that not working? Aha, because I'm in the wrong tool. Oh, sorry, I'm on select element, that's why I'm having problems. There we go. Alright, stitch selected. Wires down, scale clusters. Says default, okay. Sorry about that. Says clip mostly unwrapped. Just going to put on the checker pattern just to have a quick peek. Main problem is really you can't see it very well when it's so big on the map. But I don't really want to scale it down until it's all been unwrapped. If you do scale it down while it's being unwrapped, you end up having to scale every little bit. But as it's all being unwrapped to the same scale, because I've got this normalised map on, it means everything should fit together a lot more smoothly. I'm going to pull these apart a little bit because they look a little bit small. I'm also going to scale this bottom set of edges. Again, we want this inside edge, so we need to flip. And tools, stitch selected. Okay. I would rather this be square, so I'm just going to rotate that along there. Hold down shift just to bring it up a touch. Looks alright. We just want to plainly map this last section as well. So as per usual, tools, stitch selected. Okay. I'm going to do this last little section here. Top, bottom, planar map, Z-axis, edit. Try over here, rotate 90 degrees. Select element, I'm just going to pull apart the top and bottom there. And that's that done. Position these a little better. Also just going to scale it down a bit. Is it better? So that's, oh no, there's only one more part of the clip left, it's just that top section. Planar Z as well. Right, this space here has got nothing in, so I'm going to save a little bit of space just by plonking the bottom section of the gun inside. That's going to just save me some extra pixel space somewhere else. And I'm going to plonk it around here, I guess. I'm just going to select that all and name it clip. Just scale it down to a half decent size. Okay, I'm going to stop now. I'll roll up the other half in a second tutorial. But hopefully by now you should have some idea of how it works. It's just a matter of selecting faces, hitting unwrap and just making sure it's using the most efficient amount of space as possible. Other little sections shouldn't take too long to do, and then it's just a matter of filling it in the gap. Guns are a pain in the arse to unwrap, to be fair. It can be a little bit fiddly, very boring, but it's always worth it when it's done. I'm just going to save it and I'm just going to stop this video.